Washington's Junior Day has a star-studded roster.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all day every day today. We're talking about some defensive back recruiting in 2026, some other priority targets that are going to be on campus this weekend because, as we said, this is going to be a very, very important weekend for Washington with Junior Day. There are going to be a whole bunch of top targets on campus on March 8th and March 9th. They're going to be at the basketball game, doing a whole thing on just throughout the weekend. And Lars, first of all, shout out to you. Just a little peek behind the curtain for the everydayers. You are, for anybody's on audio side of this as well, you are recording this from your car right now in the U Village parking lot. As you are at an NIL event with Montlake Futures, where a whole bunch of Huskies are selling Girl Scout cookies. You got some awesome exclusive to Locked On Huskies interviews that are going to be posted over the next couple of weeks. So just keep an eye out. One of the reasons you guys need to click that little bell and subscribe to the channel, because there's a whole lot of fun stuff coming out of this. So Lars, that being said, one of the guys that's going to be on campus that very, very important late edition happened on Saturday afternoon is four-star defensive lineman James Carrington from Crean Lutheran High School. And this dude is a really, really exciting prospect.
Yeah, I mean, Crean Lutheran should probably sound familiar to some Husky fans because it's also where Anthony Jones comes from. And there's certain guys where you just kind of look and say, man, you need to close on him, especially when we're talking about defensive line and just defensive in general. Like, there's some guys that really you need to close on. And I think one of the unsung parts about this Junior Day coming up is there's still no spring ball. So there's nothing that's going to be distracting the coaches. It's a perfect opportunity. The vibes seem good. You know, as you mentioned that I'm around the players today, vibes seem good. And I think this seems like the perfect time to have this big weekend. And the fact that they're getting a lot of star-studded guys in does say a lot about kind of how some of these guys are feeling, where in this case, it's maybe a first visit that sets up a second visit. And a lot of that, I think you're going to start to see throughout, May and June, where some of these guys that come up for this weekend are going to end up making a return trip.
No, absolutely. That's one of the things here where you look, because we got to stay with James Carrington, right? There's no more important position in the 2026 class than defensive line. And it's something where this looks like it's going to be his first trip to campus. I know he told our buddy Scott Eklund over at Dogman, he's got a great relationship with Jason Kafusi. He played this last season at Bishop Gorman and now is going to be transferring to Crean Lutheran in California. And it's something where he's listed at 6'2", 240 right now, but he's somebody who's got a lot of frame to add weight. Looks like he'll play on the interior because he is a really, really explosive pass rusher. And this is one of those things where you look at his offer list and, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense for somebody with that frame at it's LSU, Oklahoma, where he's going to be taking official visits. But with 30 offers, it's exactly who to expect. Ohio State's in there, all these other big time schools, and it's one of those things where after Simona Katawanga committed to USC last week, and you and I talked about the potential of Bot Mulitalo flipping to Washington, what that might look like. This is exactly the kind of prospect that you need in this class where, let's be real, Lars, how many, in terms of edge plus defensive line, what do you think this class is going to look like? 5, 6, maybe even 7 prospects up front? Because it has that potential where you need to not completely overhaul it, but with some of the older guys that are graduating, you need as many big-time prospects along the defensive line as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably put that number at 5.5 and take the over, to your point, whether it's 6 or 7. I think I could see 5 for sure, which is why I think it's going to be over 5.5, because then you could mention another edge that maybe is a long-term developmental guy, or you just load up on guys that you think could play right away in the first, 1 to 2 years of their college career. And I think that's the same thing with Carrington, where you look at him and say, that's a guy where maybe he doesn't play all 12, but he gets in that, like we saw Byron Murphy at Texas, where they played 10 games as a freshman, and maybe it's mostly on special teams, but you're still on the field, you're getting game action. And especially when we talk about the trenches, it's the Big Ten. Like, you need, whether it's on special teams or whether it's on, in a 40-point blowout, anytime you can get Big Ten experience, whether it's on the road or at home, that is invaluable. And so I think the way that this defensive line class is going to get built is with guys where you're looking at probably 3 of them and saying, we need you guys to play more than 6 games or be in the position to play more than 6 and push some of the guys that are on campus. And if you only play 4, so be it. And then the next 3 or maybe some developmental, will kind of take some, maybe not a risk, but just kind of see what we can get creative with in that respect. Because, the depth is going to be tested. And I think when you look at the size that these guys possess, and, Carrington specifically, when he came from Bishop Gorman, like, again, what is the one thing that Matt Doherty and Jedd Fisch and all the coaches have said? We want guys who went to, not really big high schools, but guys that got high-level coaching in high school. Yes. Bishop Gorman, Crean Lutheran. And Crean Lutheran a little bit more newer than Bishop Gorman. It's same principle where you're looking at these guys are getting really good coaching. Anthony Jones, same sort of situation where also from Crean Lutheran, you're looking at him saying, it's a great prospect. He doesn't just have the size. He's got the good coaching. And so those are the types of players that you're looking at and expecting, hey, if you have to redshirt, so be it, but you really shouldn't because you're too talented to keep on the side.
So another guy that we should talk about in that same vein is Dakota Dickson, where this is a guy, 3-star from Northern California, Monte Vista High School. He's a really intriguing prospect in that same light where not necessarily rated as highly as James Carrington is, but as you look at it, where he's listed at 6'4", 280, 19 offers right now. He's got official visits set up to Cal and SMU at this point in time. And this is somebody where you watch the film and you say, okay, I really like what he can be here as one of these interior players in, this really the 5-down really defensive front that Ryan Walters wants to run, where I talked to a source who said he's going to be a really, really promising 3 or 5 technique defensive lineman at the next level. And that's something where you see just everything that you want in this guy in terms of what the film is. He's going to end up taking an official to Washington on June 20th. He's got an unofficial setup. I believe he's one of the guys that's supposed to be on campus this upcoming weekend. And the more I watch him, the more I say, this is the kind of depth piece that you want, where Lars, we hear it all the time where it's, oh, well, this is a 3-star guy that you can't just build a class around these guys. No, but you need some guys like this that have a lot of upside, that have a whole lot of offers as depth pieces. And this is one that could really do that really well, where he's got the full athletic profile, and he's not at, the same level of high school as Bishop Gorman, Crean Lutheran, but somebody who you can take him in and under defensive line coach Jace Kafusi for a year, 2 years, you can really coach him up and get him to exactly where you want him to be. And that's, if you're able to close on some of these big time guys, like we're going to get to, I know we got to talk about David Schwarzel, F.A. Ciali. If you're able to close on a couple of those guys alongside somebody like Dakota Dickson, and you just stack that class with the depth and the top end talent that is necessary to succeed in the Big Ten, you could be looking at exactly what you and I have been talking about, which is a top 20, top 15 class.
Yeah, and you have to remember, for everyone, because I'm glad you mentioned the 3-star thing, because there's 20, 25 at most 5-stars in every class. It should, sure. In reality, it's about 10 to 12, but in this modern age of everybody gets a star and everybody gets a bump, and you see certain guys where it's like, oh, hey, committed to Alabama, so now we're going to give him a 5-star. Just using that as an example there. So you're really looking at 25 stars and probably 150, 200 4-stars, maybe max.
I feel like it depends where you look, yeah.
But exactly. But my point of that is there's always an abundance of 3-stars, and the 3-stars are always going to, in the long run, be like, hey, wow, that guy was a 3-star in high school, low rated. How many times by year 3, 4, and now with the transfer portal 5, do you look at a guy and say, oh, yeah, he was a 3-star in high school? I'm pretty sure Carver Willis was a 3 in high school on some rankings. And now some might have him as a 4, some might as a 3, so it's semantics. But I don't think that 3-star, call it not, I don't know what the word for it is, because it's not a bad thing, but it's a stigma where like, hey, yeah. Oh, he's a 3-star, he's not good enough, or other schools are passing on him. Well, back in the day, Utah offered Sidney Jones. Like, is Utah a scrub program? Is SMU a scrub
Utah has
program?
offered Dakota, by the way.
Okay, exactly. But another example of like, really, okay, so if he's a 3-star, why is Utah offering? It's like I think 3-star guys are your lunch pail guys. 4-star are your executives, and 5-stars are your presidents and your Hall of Famers. That's how I would kind of ascribe it from a non-football standpoint. You need as many lunch pail guys as you can, and especially along the defensive line, like we're talking about with FSCI and some of the low guys, you figure out the numbers later. If they all want to come, you figure out that problem later when they're on campus.
So let's talk about a 5-star. Right after a message from our friends over at Roy. Attention to Locked On Huskies fans. Ever wish you could directly support your favorite Husky athletes and be part of their journey? Now you can with Roy, the NIL app that puts fans in control. Before NIL deals were often handled behind closed doors, and fans like you didn't have a clear way to directly support the players you love. Now with Roy, you can make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes representing Washington. With Roy, you get to choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, and get exclusive content straight from the athletes you back. The best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back, so it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. Support your favorite players directly and help shape the future of Washington sports. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Washington athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. Lars, we talked about him the other day. You really can't talk enough about a guy like this. It's Keeney Pepe from IMG, where the fact that he's going to be on campus for an unofficial visit, that's what's been reported, where he hasn't tweeted out the graphic like a whole bunch of other guys, but he just doesn't seem like a big Twitter guy. So that's its own thing, and I respect that. So you and your 10,000 followers over there, and just a subtle flex. But one thing that I think we really need to get to here is, as much as we emphasize the defensive line, we're going to continue that over the course of this here segment. But we need to talk about Keeney because it's building both sides of the trenches. And this is a guy who's rated in the top 20 overall on 247 Sports. And at 6'7", 320, you watch that film and you say, if that guy is a starting left tackle wherever he ends up in 2026, that's huge. And this being his second unofficial visit to Washington, maybe you're able to set up an official with him, get him on campus for a third time. He is somebody who's originally from California. That would be massive. And I don't mean that just because, again, he's 6'7", 320. No,
but those are the guys that, when we're talking about competing in the Big Ten, yes, rarely do you see freshman offensive linemen start. I mean, who's the Alabama one from Caden Proctor?
Caden Proctor.
Like there's a handful of those guys every couple of years, and I say every couple of years. It's really like every third year. It seems like there's one of those guys, and this seems to be that type of profile. Anytime you can get that guy on campus, by the way, twice on his own accord. We're not even talking about an official yet. If he comes up for an official, I wouldn't be surprised because I've rarely seen guys take two unofficials to a school across the country, but worth noting, and I'm glad you did, the fact that he's from California in general is significant, similar to Raiden Beinsberg, where he's from Arizona, went to IMG. It's a little bit different if the guy is from, let's say, Tampa and then goes up to IMG, or if he's from, call it Pennsylvania or whatever, where he didn't grow up watching UW. There wasn't as much coverage of or mention of UW in the household, or just kind of proximity. So anytime you can get a guy, that's why IMG is so important, and it's so unique because Steve Belichick mentioned his relationship with IMG. I know Jedd's got some ties, and sounds like Jay Rich and a few others have some ties. So I would imagine, as long as Michael Switzer can, continue that relationship. I also think, it's not just on Switzer. It's worth noting that because when you're talking about a 5-star offensive lineman, that's the entire staff being involved. That's Jedd. That's from top down, because that's not a slight at Switzer. You would hope that it's not just on Switzer to land a 5-star across the country. That'd be too much to ask almost. And I think the fact that, what do NFL teams love? What do you go prioritize if you have a top 10 pick and you have a quarterback, but you're picking in the top 10? What are you picking? A left tackle. You're going to get your left tackle. You got him in the transfer portal. So now Carver Willis can show, hey, look at what DeMond could do if he has a first or second round left tackle. Similar with Roger Rosengarten and Troy Fautano. Look at what they turned Mike into. Washington has been known to produce tackles. And so I think if you're looking at Pepe and saying, oh, well, wait, why would he go to Washington? Well, NFL track record, former NFL coach, NFL style program, NIL, everything, all the boxes are checked. So the fact that he's coming up again on his own accord cannot be undersold.
So I kind of want to dive into something you just said. I think it's a fantastic point. And this is going to make both of us feel really old. So I'm sorry in advance. No, hold on. Just let's see where I'm going with this first before you react like that, man. Come on. No, so let's think about it this way. As we started to get into this 2026, 2027, 2028 class, where we're not going to mention the years that these guys were born because it really does just make us feel ancient. You know what they grew up watching? They grew up watching Washington under Chris Peterson. They if these are guys who were paying attention to Washington, that is, they grew up watching Pete be successful. They grew up watching, over the last couple of years, they've seen Michael Penix. They've seen Washington at its highs, not, the Willingham, the Sark days where it was, okay, yeah, I see what Washington can be. No, you're not selling that anymore. Now you can sell, hey, look, this is a program that went to 3 straight New Year's Six Bowls and it's been in the college football playoff twice and been to a national championship over the last, let's just say the last 10-year sample size. Like, you have a much better sample size to work with. And I think that matters for some of these guys where maybe that is something that Keeney grew up paying attention to. And that's something when, we talk about David Schwartzel, F.A.C. Ollie, that's certainly something that these guys have seen.
I'm glad that was literally the next two names that I was going to go to, where, the local guys, who have you grown up seeing? Miles Gaskin, Buda Baker, the list goes on and on. I mean, even the guys that didn't necessarily go on to the NFL, Trey Adams, Brandon Wellington from Eastside Catholic, where there's at least relationships built up there. And it's a sense of, we know what Washington can be as a local kid, where, again, we've heard about the 08 year or the 09 year, whichever was the winless season. I can't even remember now. Right. But again, it's irrelevant now. And I think that's what's ironic is it used to be, hey, remember the 0-12? Remember the 0-12? And it's like, great. By the way, Colorado was winless a couple of years ago too, and no one mentions that. So I think now you're far enough removed, and you've also been to 3 New Year's Six with Pete's. You've been to a national championship with Kalen. You won a Sugar Bowl, which is just crazy to think about for UW, because it's like that's an SEC bowl game to play in or a Big 12 game to play in, but you never get a chance to be Washington in that game. And so the fact that you won that in your first shot is a major, that even way outweighs the 0-12 season in my mind, because all these kids care more about what have you done in the past, call it 5 years. When I was in middle school coming into high school, not even Oregon's, the Anthony Thomas days are great, but it's like, okay, like I was like 10, maybe, 8 to 10 when I watched that. Whereas in high school now, I'm like actually watching other schools emerge, watching the reemergence of Ohio State, watching the reemergence of Washington. And so when you're looking at FSCLA and David Schwartzel, when we're talking, it's an interesting dichotomy, right? Because you want the local guys, Derek and the 2 O'Day guys, FA and the other one, but you also want David, and you want some, but you also want the California guys, and you want some guys maybe from Texas or Colorado or Utah, right? And there's an interesting kind of balance that you have to weigh. But I think the thing that's important is, and the crazy part about this upcoming weekend, they're all coming in together. So I think that's a big message for Jedd to say, hey, you know what? Because we've seen this from other coaches go the other way. Oh, well, this weekend's a local junior day. We want all the in-state kids that maybe we're not even going to consider taking. We want to make it look like we have an in-state presence. No, Jedd's doing the right thing, bringing all the targets in who want to or who are able to make it up in terms of how it fits in their schedule and everything. But it's getting local guys to explain, hey, when recruits from the area interact with kids from Texas and Florida and Pennsylvania and Ohio and get to share, like, hey, is this what Seattle's like? Oh yeah. And now all of a sudden you're almost subconsciously having them play as a host,
right?
And they're still trying to consider your program. And so that's actually an ingenious sell, like by Jedd. We haven't really seen that from other coaches, and I think it is worth documenting.
And then, so just on top of that, because you just made a fantastic point, and to continue building on that, where all of the guys who are committed to Washington right now are supposed to be on campus, and a bunch of them are local. Whether you think about Wasila Lobi, Terrence Sarian, Adar Yang, where there are a whole bunch of guys that can continue to sell that. Where it's this is just kind of what it's like. You can have them be those peer recruiters, and that's a really important part of all this. Where I think that this is a really solid start to the class when we think about the guys that are already part of it. Because, you had Ansu Sonoe in there, CJ Wallace as well. And those are really nice building blocks. When Isun Tafa is another guy who we need to discuss that's going to be back on campus for this weekend, and giving him an opportunity where, he was committed to Washington, decommits following the coaching change, and he's got at least 2 more opportunities where he'll be back for an official in June. Plus right now, you have plenty of chances to continue to sell him on Washington and say, hey, we know you committed here because of your relationship with Brennan Carroll, but here are all these other reasons, and here are all these other building blocks that we can show you, and this is what we're putting together with Brady Smigiel, who's going to be on campus. I can't believe we're at 19 minutes of recording this and we haven't said the name Brady Smigiel yet, and that's really not out of us trying to do that, but that just hit me. It's all of that. It's Brian Bonner. It's Caden Dixon Wyatt. It's all of these guys that are going to be on campus. This is a really, really important weekend. Whether, you think that you're in the top 5 for some of these guys or not, the fact that they're going to be on campus means that you're in the running.
And to seal that point home, the fact that we forgot Brady or didn't mention him is because of all the talent. It's not like we're just focusing on 2 or 3 guys. We're mentioning 2 or 3, but we've really gotten to about almost a dozen now. But it's about the total collection of talent where you're not just focusing on one position or one guys from California or guys from wherever. It's like
Ooh.
you're putting all of them together and saying, you know what, you guys figure out that Washington is the destination. We're going to put all the pieces around you and the infrastructure to say, hey, all the NFL sell, Jedd, the new coaches, all this and that. But it's an ingenious way to do this.
So I absolutely agree. And that's what something just hit me as you said that, where, yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about the trenches because those are where the upgrades need to be made. And how do you continue to sell that to, a top tier running back, a top tier quarterback, some of these other, top tier linebackers, defensive backs, whatever. It's showing that, hey, we've identified that this is our biggest weakness right now. And these are the moves we're trying to make. Yeah, we went out and we're getting a borderline 5-star tackle on campus because we know that that's really important to what we need to do. We went out and we're saying, hey, this is the top uncommitted defensive lineman on the West Coast, James Carrington. He's coming up. We know how important that is for our future. So continuing to make moves like that to say, we understand that this is what we need to succeed in the Big Ten and we're going to attack that. Hey, it just shows that they understand where their weaknesses are and they are doing everything in their power to attack them moving forward. And Lars, defensive back isn't necessarily a weakness, but there are some really talented prospects that will be on campus. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. And the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Lars, I cheated to start this segment because we're talking about defensive backs, but I cannot help but mention Ramzak Fruean, the linebacker / safety / maybe potentially edge rusher from Bethel, who's going to be on campus this weekend, where I watch him play safety and I just say, yeah, that makes sense. And I watch him play linebacker and I say, yeah, that makes sense. And he says, hey, if teams tell me if I continue to grow, they want me to play edge rusher, I say, yeah, I get it, because he's just a missile when he comes downhill. And this is one of those guys where if you're able to secure a commitment from him, not only does it add to the whole in-state, the Bethel pipeline that you're building after getting Zydru's Rennie Saleh last year, it just shows, hey, we like big, physical, projectable body types that we think can play multiple positions in the Big Ten and be successful.
You know whose name came to mind I think I might have mentioned this on the podcast before, maybe on this exact same player, but it's Taylor Rapp.
I think you did, yeah.
Seaholm High School, smaller school. And again, Bethel, I think, is bigger than Seaholm. But just a guy where I think he was listed as an athlete. And it's like, yeah, that's probably accurate. Just call him an athlete. Just an athlete who will play defense. It's like, which position? Does it matter? Is 1 of 11. We'll figure it out later. Wherever he lines up. And I think that's, because again, that's what the modern era of college football is becoming, where a little different than offense, but similar, where you're just trying to get truly, and I know it's coach speak, but you're getting the best 11 guys on the field. And he's a prime example of somebody where we don't necessarily know where he's going to play, and it really doesn't matter. And you might think, again, this is another case of, well, it's a 3-star from Bethel. We're just getting an in-state guy to take an in-state guy. Or how do we know his tape would hold up? And I by the way,
I know you're not. I'm just, I couldn't agree with what you're saying more.
But because again, you know, we're on the other side of that argument. But it's like, oh, well, hey, maybe if his tape was in California, would it be the same? Again, Taylor Rapp is that same message where he could have played anywhere. Could have gone anywhere on the West Coast or in the country for that matter. And it's now playing in the NFL for the same reason, where it's like, no, whether you're at 1A, 2A, 1B, unless you're playing 7 on, and I mean like 7 on in terms of on the field on Friday night, it's not 7 on in the summer, then it's a different story. But no, like you just turn on the tape and it's like anytime you can get an inside guy, and those are the guys that end up playing the best, honestly. I feel like,
absolutely.
I mean, Buddha was a little bit different because he was an automatic 4/5. But it was just a guy where, look, no matter whether it's a safety, strong safety, Nick, whatever you put him, he'll figure it out. He'll solve the problem no matter what. It's exactly the same case.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's something where, like, the body type 6'4", 205, 210, where just the way he comes down and hits. Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of. That's why I started shaking my head, because like, yeah, if you watch that dude and you watch the way he hits, you'd say, okay, yeah, no, this makes sense. That kid can play anywhere that he really wants to. But I want to talk about another guy in that similar mold who was from California originally, like Keeney Pepe, plays at IMG now. and that's Keenyi Giles. This is a really, really interesting prospect where one thing that that's been pointed out by, shout out to Santi Wong, again, one of our great everydayers, about Ryan Walters that we really like about him is that he likes to cross-train his defensive backs, where they'll play corner, he'll play safety. Keenyi's doing that right now at IMG, where you go and you turn on his film, he's playing nickel, he's playing outside, he's playing safety. And that just makes him a very obvious target for Ryan Walters, for Taylor Mays, and John Richardson. It's one of those guys where you bring him in and you say, okay, whatever position he plays, that's fine. Because he's got I just watch his film and I say, you want somebody who's going to play in the box and hit, where he's listed at 5'11", 175. He plays and acts like he's a lot bigger than that, which is just a lot of fun to watch for any high schooler's film, where he's what size? And you go in and you're like, oh, okay, maybe I think he's going to play like this, he can play like that. No. This guy likes to play in the box. He likes to hit. He likes to attack physically. And I feel like that's something we've seen from a lot of these defensive backs. And one of the reasons you and I wanted to talk about this and why we led with Ramzak Fruean, because he's just kind of the ultimate example of that. But I look at Keenyi Giles and I just say, yeah, with the coaching from IMG, with everything that he's put together on film, with his offer list too, where he's got an official visit set up to Notre Dame, like he's got some big time offers. It's really interesting to see how this defensive back class might shape out.
So again, two former Husky DBs, Elijah Molden, and Miles Bryant. Sounds like a kind of hybrid of two, more so height on Molden, tackling ability of Miles Bryant. Not that Elijah couldn't, but both of them kind of in that similar mode where could they play strong, back safety? Could you be a nickel? Could you be an outside corner? Probably can do a mixture of both. But yeah, in that size, you don't really want. I mean, Trent's the exception. Let's be real here. Trent,
for sure.
Exception.
Yeah, he's a different player.
For listed at 5'11", it can hang on the outside. Trent is 1 of 1 in that respect, or 2 of 2, no pun intended. With that being said, yeah, anytime, and that's kind of why we had talked about before the official promotion became, announced, where John Richardson was promoted to secondary coach, full overarching secondary head coach, the way I would describe it to be the head coach of the defensive backs. Similar to what, an old defensive back coach is secondary coach, whatever you want to call it. John Richardson's star is on the rise. And to kind of bring this full circle as you led the show with, I just got to talk to both Alice McLaughlin and Ryland Dillon Allen, the transfer from AU and the freshman safety. Both said, don't be surprised if we both share this opinion, John Richardson's not a defensive coordinator in the next 12 to 24 months. And ideally that would be at Washington if Ryan Walters gets another head coaching job or whatever and balls out or whatever. But the point is John Richardson's star is on the rise, and from Arizona all the way through Wyoming and even at Wazoo, he's known how to identify and develop defensive backs, where Jalen Watson, another example, another Chief, ironically, goes to Wazoo, ends up being in the NFL. Not necessarily a slot cornerback, but I think he's proven, and I think Jordan Shaw did a decent job of proving it last season, where
I agree.
He can also develop nickels just as well. And that's why I'm curious to see how they add Alex McLaughlin and some of these guys into, this year, because when you turn on this tape, much like we said with Belichick last year, just wait till you see the defense, guys. Wait till we see it in fall camp, but just wait till you see it in the actual season. I think if the nickels kind of do an extra different thing this season, I wouldn't be surprised, and that's going to pay dividends on the recruiting trail, especially when you're talking about guys at IMG saying, hey, well, my recruitment, I might be committed to Notre Dame, but I'm going to keep things open and, watch how the season progresses. What's not to say Washington doesn't, make that push that maybe Notre Dame takes a step back. And I'm not saying they will, but I'm just saying these are kind of the things that guys are going to also be thinking about when they come up for these visits in the spring is, hey, I love the school, but let me see what it looks like in the fall first.
So I love where you're going with that, because one other guy who's going to be on campus that we wanted to make sure we hit on for a minute is CJ Lavender, who plays a lot like that. I know we've talked about him before on the show, and it's just interesting to see just that type of player get recruited, because the one guy it has been reported he's going to be on campus this weekend, where one that you and I are keeping a very close eye on is Devon Benjamin. We mentioned him a lot, where that's the kind of guy where, and I remember when John Richardson first got here last year and they're tweeting like, oh, hey, look what we've been able to do with all these 3 stars from all these different stops. What if we could get our hands on a 5-star? Obviously, they're talking about Deshaun Lee at this point last year. And now it's, hey, Devon Benjamin, we're, think about you in that same mold. And I'm just really curious to see what it's going to look like. And I say all that to come back to your original point of John Richardson and what he's going to look like in the future as a defensive coordinator, where, yeah, that's certainly a role that he's going to play at some point. And I think that's something that could help Washington on the recruiting trail, where obviously we had a lot of people in our comments when Robert Bala, after Steve Belichick left saying, hey, Robert Bala for DC. We know he's done it before. We'd like to see that. At the very least, you want to give him a co-DC title. Obviously that didn't happen, and he got it at Florida. That's something that I don't feel like that would be the case with John Richardson, where I wouldn't be surprised if this time next year we're saying, hey, John Richardson did get a co-defensive coordinator upgrade. And if Ryan Walters does end up taking another job at some point in time, whenever that might be, if John Richardson ends up being the guy who takes over, where that's just kind of how valuable he has been to Jedd Fisch, to what Washington's defense was last year, and the way he was able to help develop Thaddeus Dixon, how Ephesians Brysock came along. Now, obviously, with Takario Davis back in the boat for 2025, and everything he's shown that he can do throughout his career. So I'm really curious to see how you might be able to sell that this season on the recruiting trail, because obviously it worked out pretty well last year where you didn't get Dijon Lee, but you did get Dylan Robinson. So I think that there's at least one more big-time defensive back, and that's why we're talking about Devon Benjamin, that could end up choosing Washington in the cycle.
And who was the guy that also, when you had Takario Davis, it's, hey, now Jay Rich has both of his guys from Arizona. Now he can say, hey, these are the two guys that I identified in high school, brought in the same class. Now watch what they do this season. Makes you kind of wonder, man, if Ben Morrison could have been a Husky, what could have been? But with that being said, it's one of those situations where I think both those guys ending up at Washington should say, okay, if you're Dijon, why didn't Takario come? Well, now he did. Now you're in now Devon Benjamin is going to look and say, hey, both of them came. They're both getting better. Takario is much better at Washington than he was at Arizona last season. I'm not saying that's going to matter for Benjamin specifically, but it's just another example of, hey, look at the difference coaching truly makes. It's not just the pro sell. It's not just this. It's being a pro in college. It's getting pro coaching in college. I mean, Jay Rich hasn't been in the NFL, but might as well be. I mean, dude's good enough.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming at you throughout the offseason, so please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.